So, let's talk about a really big problem. How in the world do you police a borderless digital world? Today, we're going to dive deep into the UN's ambitious plan to fight cybercrime on a global scale, all through the lens of some fascinating research by Dr. Islam Saror. Let's get right into it.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the fundamental issue, crime without borders. Then, we'll explore the UN's new global rulebook and the key tool it uses to try and close that justice gap. And finally, we'll dig into the key findings from the research and what it recommends for the future.
All right, first up, why was a massive global agreement like this even necessary? Well, it all boils down to this fundamental mismatch at the very heart of our digital lives.
I mean, just think about it for a second. You've got a hacker in one country, right? They steal data from a company in a completely different country, and then they launder that money through a third country. How can traditional law enforcement, which pretty much stops at the border, ever hope to keep up with that?
And this right here is the problem in a nutshell. Cybercrime operates globally, but our systems of justice are almost entirely local. This creates what the research calls a justice gap. It's this digital no man's land where criminals can hide out, exploiting different laws to basically get away with it.
So, with a problem that huge, what's the solution? Well, that brings us to the United Nations Convention Against Cybercrime. It's a global treaty designed to get all these different countries on the same page so they can actually fight back together.
You know what's really smart about this convention is how it defines cybercrime. Instead of trying to list every possible digital crime, which would be outdated in a week, it focuses on the tools used. Anything criminal that uses information and communication technologies. This makes the whole thing future-proof because it can adapt to crimes that haven't even been invented yet.
Now, within that really broad definition, the convention does lay out 11 specific types of crime. Things like illegal access, hacking, data interference, ICT fraud, and the absolutely horrific crime of online child exploitation. The idea is that every country that signs on has to agree to make these things illegal in their own domestic laws. It's all about creating a level playing field.
Okay, so you've got this rule book that everyone's agreed to, but how does it actually help you catch the bad guys across borders? Well, this is where we get to the convention's single most powerful tool for closing that justice gap, a legal process called extradition.
Simply put, extradition is just the formal system where one country hands over a suspected criminal to another. The whole point is to make sure that national borders don't become get-out-of-jail-free cards for criminals who can just hop on a plane.
But, and this is a big but, it's not that simple. For extradition to even be on the table, you have to clear a major legal hurdle. It's called the principle of dual criminality. All it means is that the thing the person is accused of has to be a crime in both countries, the one asking for the person and the one being asked to hand them over.
And this is where it gets really clever. Dr. Saror's paper points to the perfect example, the famous case of Kim.com, the founder of Mega Upload. The US wanted him extradited from New Zealand for breaking intellectual property rules. But New Zealand law didn't have that exact same crime. So what happened? The court there looked at his actions and said, well, what he did amounts to what we call a breach of trust, and that is a crime here. So even though the legal labels were different, the underlying act was illegal in both places. That's dual criminality in action. It's flexible.
So let's just walk through how this is supposed to work, step by step. It starts with a cybercrime. Then the bad guy is found in another country. The victim's country then sends a formal request for extradition. The host country then does that critical dual criminality check. If the act is a crime in both places, boom, extradition can be approved, and the suspect is sent back to face prosecution. So that's the theory, right? That's how it's all drawn up on paper. But how does it actually hold up in the real world? Well, this is where we get into the core of Dr. Saror's research. Let's look at the key findings.
The research paper actually boils it all down to 9 specific findings that give us a really clear picture of the convention's strengths and its weaknesses.
So on the good side, the convention makes every crime it covers automatically extraditable. That's huge. And we've seen how dual criminality is a really flexible principle. But here's the reality check from the research. None of this legal stuff matters without political will. Good relationships and bilateral agreements between countries are absolutely essential. And there's one more powerful rule. If a country refuses to extradite one of its own citizens, they must prosecute that person themselves. No free passes.
Okay, so knowing all that, what's the path forward? Based on these findings, the paper offers some really clear recommendations on how to make this whole system work better. The to-do list is pretty straightforward. First, countries need to get their own houses in order, strengthen their own laws to line up with the convention. They also need to update all those old extradition treaties to specifically include cybercrime. That prosecute or extradite rule, it needs to be applied, no exceptions. And finally, the world just needs to keep pushing for a truly unified definition of cybercrime to close any remaining loopholes.
When you boil it all down, everything we've talked about, the definitions, the rules, the treaties, it's all driving toward one single thing: creating a global legal net that's so tight there's nowhere left for cybercriminals to hide. The goal is to eliminate every single safe harbor, every legal gray area they can possibly exploit.
And that leaves us with this final, really important question. Look, the UN Convention is a massive step forward, no doubt about it. But in a world where technology changes in the blink of an eye and political alliances are always shifting, can laws alone ever be enough to truly police our borderless digital world? The answer to that is probably going to define the future of our safety online.